Hello and welcome to the Yes Podcast. This is Jim Riley and Rod Kuntz today hosting this call. It's our second episode. Rod, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Jim. Thanks. Always a pleasure.
You know, although we live next door to each other almost, here we are in a virtual call to record this because we've got busy lives and lots going on. But I think it just proves the point that nothing should get in your way of achieving your objective and your goal, even if that means you got to get on a call when you live a few miles away from one another.
You know, at this point, we should be used to it. And the neat thing also is we have to be able to adapt to changing conditions, whatever that happens to be. And so I think it keeps us on our toes. I never mind a new challenge, a new twist. I think it keeps us nimble.
I like that. We always used to say nimble in my tequila company because the competitors were so big with shareholders and all the yes people that they had to go through to get something done. We were able to outmaneuver them and out nimble them on a daily basis. You know, you can get to market a lot faster. So I love that term. And you're right. You know, and that's one of the great things about what came out of COVID is we found all kinds of new tools on how to conduct business, even if it's Zoom or Skype or whatever that looks like. There's no excuses for not connecting and making business happen.
Absolutely. And I think, in fact, today I tried making a phone call to a business associate and it didn't go through. I didn't leave a voicemail. And they said, better yet, text, right?
Yep.
And I didn't want to text either. I thought it's just, for me, I'm not ambidextrous with my thumbs, thumbidextrous, but I can sit down at the keyboard. So I thought, okay, well, my first choice was email. They preferred text, which tells me they prefer writing. It wasn't urgent. So I thought, well, I'll type an email out. And you know what? The point is I didn't get discouraged and walk away. I got my task done. It's checked off and it should be clear, maybe even more clear than it, I'm sure in my case, more clear than a text.
Well, what I like about what you just said too, Rod, is that you identified that they'd prefer something in writing because that's exactly what a text is. And, you know, it's like an open door, like send me a message. Well, why not send an email where you can be a little bit more detailed and have a little bit of a history to it? So that was very intuitive of you to push an email out.
Right. Well, and again, whatever it takes. The point is we can't be looking for excuses not to do something. We need to find ways to accomplish what it is we wanted to do. I guess that's mindset, isn't it?
It's a mindset. And it brings me to my first point for today's call. I saw a headline that says, you know what needs to be done. And I was just expanding on that thought, right? You know what needs to be done. Well, how does that relate to business? You know, I think most of us in business knows what needs to be done, but are we willing to do it and act on it, right? We can talk about stuff all day long. We can have our goals and our dreams, and we can wish that we had, you know, the money to go on these vacations or whatever that looks like to somebody, right? We know it needs to be done, but are we willing to act on it? And by the way, when I say act on it, I don't mean for 24 hours or a week or a couple of weeks. I mean for the long haul. You know, if you're going to start a business, right, are you willing to act on that for the long haul, the 3, 5, 10 years that it takes to be successful? I don't know. I'm asking the question. We know it needs to be done. Are we willing to act on it?
Well, I think too, you just reminded me of something. How many times even in my past, I can think of instances where I could busy myself with projects that were business related, but they weren't the high priority, the ones that really needed to be done. Mm-hmm. And too often, I think we use some of our busy work to say, well, I'm working, I am, moving the dial, but it's not the work that needs to be done. It's not that hard work. And so we can justify our inaction on important items by doing less important items and still say we're working. So it's that mental challenge. You have to really set your goals, set your priorities, and then stick to them and hold yourself accountable to those hard tasks.
You know, Rod, that's so true. And I'll admit, I work from home, and what my wife and kids see is me go upstairs to my office, and I'm in my office for whatever length of period of time it seems like that to them, like 12 hours a day. To me, it feels like 2 hours. But, you know, when I get downstairs, they're like, thank you for working so hard. And I always do like a little self-valuation, like, am I working hard or am I just doing busy work? And for me, if it's not something that's going to move the needle towards, you know, the financial gain of that business or the building foundational blocks of that business, then I'm just doing busy work, right? And I'm not doing the hard work. And I have found myself, admittedly, you know, quite often in the last 6 months, filling myself with more busy work than hard work. And I've started to formulate some lists, and maybe this is some good advice for people listening, is formulate some list of the work and then the hard work on another list. The hard work is that which will move the needle in the direction that you want it to go. And maybe it's something like building a business plan or building a budget for your business or reaching out and making those phone calls you've been hesitant to make, things like that. And as you start to fill your day with more things that move the needle, you will find more success in what you're doing, as opposed to, like you said, Rod, just having some busy work.
Right. And I guess the caution I want to throw out there too is some of that busy work, in fact, most of that busy work is necessary. To me, it's more of how we prioritize it. And I think that's part of what we need to do to be more productive and more successful is to create systems that work for us, whether that's a daily plan, whether that's setting up our bookkeeping, whether that's getting different software so that we're spending less time doing things we're not as efficient at and spending the time doing what we're good at, you know, and really monetizing our talents. And if that means subsourcing bookkeeping or having different help for record keeping, you know, those are busy tasks, but we can't get buried by those. We need to use what we're really driven to do and keep that other stuff at a minimum. We still have to know what's going on, keep your fingers on it and all that, but not let it bury us, not let it consume our energy, especially our creative energy.
Yeah. You know, talking about organization on the Answers Yes podcast, episode 213, I had Lucas Root on, and he talked about, you know, getting organized and being prepared for your day. I actually titled the show, "Is Your Desk as Messy as Mine?" And, you know, to my point, I guess I thought I was doing a lot of busy work. And yesterday I organized my desk and everything that was around it. And I realized I didn't have as much busy work as I thought. And I was able to really hone in on some of the things that were going to make a difference, you know, and you're right. You do need some of that busy work stuff. But I also know that there's other things that are going to take priority. So it's just a good topic of conversation. You know, how are you spending your day at work? You know, how are you being productive and bringing value to your work?
Absolutely. And I think you brought up too, you know, you work from home, I work from home, and that brings its own challenges. And I have an upstairs studio, I have a downstairs, like I'll call it a sub office. And then I like to do work at a desk that we have in our dining room area because my wife works from home, and that way we can be close. We can be on the same floor, and it just seems like she's close. She's busy doing her stuff, I'm busy doing mine. And here, quick story, the other day I was at the downstairs desk and she was working over at the table, and it was about 4.5 hours went by and I hadn't gotten up. I was focused. I was doing some creative content, right? I was focused. And after about 4.5 hours, she said, "Are you done working? Are you ready to take a break?" She said, "I've not heard one word out of you." And it's like, "Where are you?" And it's like, she's right here. I'm right here in the room, but that's how focused you need to be. And when you're working from home, there are so many distractions. You know, it can be a knock on the door. It can be the animals loose, the dogs barking, a child, a spouse. And anytime you break that concentration, it takes a while to get back into it. So being focused and finding those safe places to get that work done when you need it done, or just communicating, I really need to get some of this work done. I can't get interruptions for a while, you know?
Yeah.
And that's part of organizing your day and creating systems, success systems for your work.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, I want to take a little shift in direction, and that's to talk a bit about, you know, I want to call it, we'll title it interviewing and interview skills, and that applies on both sides of the fence, as you know, Rod, whether you're interviewing somebody or you're being interviewed. I think it's an important topic right now when we look at what's happening in our economy and with companies across the country. I was listening to a report yesterday where there is some companies that are starting to do job freezes because finances are tight and business is slowing. And regardless if that's a fact or not, we live in a society where you can always hone in on your interview skills and your ability to communicate. And by the way, when I talk about ability to communicate as it relates to an interview, you might be interviewing for a job, or you might be interviewing somebody for a job, or you might be meeting with someone to invest in your company that you're looking at starting, or a potential partner, or finally, you might even be being interviewed by an investor that wants to put money into your company. So there's all different types of platforms where you would be in an interview type setting where your skills will be critical to your success. We talked about this a little bit last week, Rod, on our Young Entrepreneurs Syndicate. I don't know if you want to weigh in a little bit on the topic.
Well, I have a lot to say about interviews. So I think interviews are important, and I don't think you said it's a skill, right? And like any skill, it has to be developed. And the only way you can develop it is to practice it, right? If you want to be the best place kicker, you want to be the best goaltender, or you want to be the best whatever, you have to practice it. And practicing interview skills, I think, is essential. And when I taught high school years ago, I used to give extra credit to my students if they would go out and do a job interview, complete with the application and stuff. I give them extra credit if they interviewed for a job they did not want and didn't need. And I wanted them to practice getting in that zone, because if you go in to a job interview that you don't need, don't want, there's no pressure on you. And you can go in relaxed and at ease and really soak up the learning experience from that. And if you practice that, that's what it is. You're comfortable. And if you're comfortable, you're confident. If you're confident, you're going to make a better impression. And to me, that's the takeaway. Get comfortable in that environment. Get comfortable turning it around when they ask you questions, to ask questions back. Because one thing I've learned in my careers is the person who asks the question is the one who's in control. So, finding ways to do that tactfully and with talent and skill, it takes practice. And it can be fun if you take the pressure off of yourself, the performance issue.
Yeah, good point. Hey, by the way, if you're listening to the show, as I mentioned briefly, we did a complete curriculum with our Young Entrepreneurs Syndicate on job application and interview skills. So if you're thinking about joining any types of groups, you might want to look at our group, because these are really important topics that we cover in a Q&A setting. So not only do we walk through the curriculum, but if you've got questions about your own interview skills or how to improve what you're doing, we're there for that. So I want to touch on a few things that we talked about that night, Rod, because I know we've got far more limited time here on the show. But first of all, there was a quote that I read that night, and it was, "Opportunities don't happen, you create them," by Chris Grosser. And I just think, in an interview, you have the opportunity to create that opportunity for yourself. And one of the things that I like to say is you have to win that decision. And what I mean by that is oftentimes you go into the interview process and you could be at a tie with somebody else. And maybe that's based on personality versus experience. Well, I like to be able to win those ties. And I'm going to rattle off a couple things that will help you win that tie. And Rod, you can weigh in on them, but here they are in brief. Dress the part. It's better to dress up than down. Do your research on the job or what you're looking to interview with. Have questions prepared. Be confident. Know why you want to be there. Know your worth. Don't be arrogant. Be upbeat and excited for the opportunity. Be willing and available, and prepare to do your best. And by the way, I think all those things apply in any one of those scenarios I outlined earlier, whether you're interviewing, being interviewed, looking to raise capital, or find a partner.
Absolutely, Jim. And those some great points. Again, no matter what you're doing, those things should be at the forefront of our mind. It's that first impression. It's the lasting impression. And I think you said it later on that night too. What you need to do is stand out.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who want that same job. And like you said, they may have better degrees. They might have a better resume. But if they don't have that people factor, if they don't have that standout ability, then you can overcome. You can be the winner. And I always like the underdog story anyway. So I like going in being the underdog. It makes it more of a challenge.
And Rod, by the way, standing out doesn't mean coming to the interview in your pajamas, which somebody did to me once.
It also doesn't mean being arrogant, saying I'm worth the moon. You should pay me this. We had a young boy, probably 10 years old, show up at our doorstep a couple of days ago, and the leaves have just started falling. I mean, they didn't even litter the lawn. And this little boy comes up with a rake in his hand, and he knocks on the door and he says, "Hey, can I rake your leaves for $17?" And it's like, no, if you negotiated, I might have paid him $5 just to give him $5 to work, but it wasn't worth it. And to come up with some outrageous thing, it was like, no, shut the door. And, we typically let kids do stuff like that. We pay them to do it, but it was that attitude. It was over the top, and that doesn't work for me. Doesn't work for most employers.
Yeah, no, good point. Well, it kind of leads me into a second series of bullet points about the interview. And we talk about this all the time, and I think it's important, is be willing to share stories about yourself, right? Maybe that's a challenging situation you overcame, a successful outcome or a win, how you committed to a project or an outcome of something, how you made a difference, right? Or how others feel about you, or an accolade for doing a good job. But these are real examples of things that have happened in your life. Maybe if that kid told you why his job was worth $17, maybe he trims the grass along with that, or drops a box of chocolates on your doorstep. I don't know, but
right.
There could be more to that, right? So bring it all together. And sometimes the best way to do that is a story. And Rod, you preach that all the time, but I don't think that it soaks in with people because they overlook the power of a story.
Right. And, you and I always do that. Every story has a point, and every point has a story. If that boy said, my dog's sick and, we needed to get medicine, or my parents think we have to get rid of the dog because we can't afford the dog food, and I want, I'd have paid him $20 to not rake my lawn. Right. So you're right. The story is important.
Actually, that's actually a really good point, because oftentimes we don't understand the intent behind the cost of something, or, this business operator, or why they're charging what they're charging. If he said, look, Mr. Kuntz, I've got to do 12 lawns to make over $200 that I need. Like you said, maybe it's to pay a vet bill. Like, hey, I'll pay you $20 not to mow my lawn, right? So a story could make the difference between you getting the job or not. If he might have labeled why he charged that and what his intents are for the money, again, you might have paid more. And so I just think it's really kind of a missed opportunity, and you laid it out perfectly. Our reason to talk about this with the young man wanting to rake your leaves.
Absolutely. And again, you can find stories in anything. Our daily lives are a story, but how it applies, finding that application that's going to humanize it and touch people's hearts, because we're not just people on a resume. We're people with feelings. We're people with compassion. We're people with wants and needs and desires, and filling a job slot is only one part of that desire. It's only one part of that need. Filling it with somebody you want to be around, somebody you feel good around, somebody that you feel like is going to be a good team member and not just selfish and thinking of themselves. Those are what we're looking for. Those are the attitudes and the attributes that you should bring to a job interview. Is this someone you would want to go on a date with? Is this someone you'd want to socialize with? Because that's really what it comes down to.
Well, look, to kind of wrap up this job application interview skills discussion, because this show's more about tidbits than hour-long ordeals here. Here's my last points. Don't be afraid to ask for the job. You've gone in, you've done your research, you've been confident, you know what your worth is, you've told some stories, you've filled out the application with your resume, your cover letter, and your potential references. Don't be afraid to ask for the job on the way out. Just like I'm not going to be afraid to ask these listeners to consider looking at the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate and the other things that we're doing, right? Oftentimes people miss that step of asking for the job on the way out the door. Because by the way, if you've done your job, you are the solution to their problem.
Yeah.
That is the key to success, is be somebody's solution.
Yeah. The last thing I'll throw in there, Jim, is make sure you follow up. Isn't it something that, that you might not have got the job. You might have been the number 2 guy, but you follow up in 3 days and then you find out that their number 1 pick selected a job with a different company. You're now in first place. You got to be there. You got to stay in the game.
Yeah, and I've heard you say it, Rod, and this is kind of an old school technique, but it still works. Follow up with a handwritten note if you can, and make it timely. The second you get home or on your way driving home, grab a thank you card, fill it out, pop it in the mail, and give a sincere thank you, and maybe a kind of reference back to the interview, something that was funny or something that was said, because that goes so much further than an email or not doing it at all. And by the way, some of the most successful companies still do handwritten notes. As a lot of people know, I'm a Legionnaire for First Form nutritional products. Whenever you order something from them, and this is why I'm working with them, you get a handwritten note of thank you and gratitude in every single one of their packages they send. And it's not just thank you, signed Josh, the warehouse guy. No, they encourage you, like, hey, congratulations on your quest to be healthy, and I hope this product works for you. And if you have any, like, they go on and on and on, right? I'm like, how do they do this with every order? But it makes a difference. Don't forget to follow up and thank them, as you suggested.
Great points, Jim. Absolutely. Well, I can hardly wait for our next conversation. So make sure you dial back in, folks.
Yep, right on. Well, it's been fun, Rod. Hey, if you enjoyed this show, please share it with people. This is on 2 channels. It's on the Answer is Yes podcast channel, and it's also on the Young Entrepreneurs Syndicate podcast channel. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, almost every other podcast publisher out there. And this is 2 of many more episodes to come. So thanks for tuning in. Rod Kuntz and Jim Riley on Yes Podcast.